went looking for trouble. And boy, I found her. She's in love with herself. She likes the dark. Grey Wolf Studios.
Okay, so let's go over the various settings. And apparently there's a firmware upgrade available for the Sidewinder SCT. Okay, so under the Basics tab, we have really common things like voltage cutoff and the volts per cell auto cutoff options, if you will. I don't know what else to call them. So the voltage cutoff is basically it's basically I don't know. I personally always set that to auto. So it basically the ESC auto detects what the voltage of or how many cells the lipo is that you plugged into it by the voltage that it gets from it, and then determines like the lowest safe point that it can run down to and things like that. I usually just set that to auto. Now, if you only run one size battery, like say my short course truck, for example, will only hold a 2S pack. So I can set the cutoff voltage to 2 cell lipo because I never use anything else than that. But most of my kits I use either 2 or 3 cell lipo depending on how big the kit is, or I use either 4 or 6 cell lipo again depending on how big the kit is. So if it's one that I use, different cells with, I'll set it to auto. Now, I do set the auto lipo. If you set it to auto lipo, then you can actually control what point is too low voltage per cell, and your ESC will basically shut your car off once the battery has reached that particular number. Like I usually set mine at 3.2 volts per cell. So once my lipo drops under 3.2 volts per cell under load, the ESC will cut off and the vehicle will stop running. Now, sometimes it'll start running again for a minute. And, it'll let you use short bursts because basically what happens is under load it'll cut off under load. So once it cuts off, now the battery's not under load anymore, and the voltage will spring back up a little bit. So once it dips under, like once it gets to 3.1 volts on one of the cells, it'll cut off, and what'll happen is that 3.1 volt will spring back up to probably like 3.4, 3.5, something like that. Which basically, once it kind of springs back, the ESC resets, and you'll be able to use it for a minute, maybe not even a minute, 20 seconds or so before it dips back down and it cuts out again. That's basically, you can kind of use that to get the kit back to you. If it's a considerable distance away or whatever, you can kind of use that to get it back closer to you so you don't have to walk a real long distance to go get it. The next setting is reverse type, and you basically have an option of you can have like normal reverse. With that, you can turn off the reverse. Like say you're racing, most races do not allow you to use reverse, so people will just disable it to make sure they don't accidentally do it. And then And then this particular ESC has a crawler reverse setting, which I imagine is a very slow reverse. Um, Motor direction. Basically, if you hook up your motor and your ESC and everything, and your motor is spinning the opposite way you want it to, there's a couple of different things you can do. One is to come into the ESC and change the motor direction setting inside the ESC. Another thing you can do is there's three wires on a brushless motor that hook up to these three wires on a brushless ESC. All you got to do is unplug any two of these wires and just switch them, and that will reverse the motor direction also. You can also reverse motor direction on your transmitter. So there's a bunch of ways you can do it. That's just one. There's a place to set motor type, whether you're running brushless or brushed motors. This particular ESC power on warning beep. You can enable it or disable it. You can set how much brakes you want, the maximum braking power that you want. This particular profile I have set up with 40%. So when I have the brake engaged 100% of the way, the motor's only going to provide 40% of normal braking strength. And then drag brake is basically, you can set drag brake, which is basically the amount of braking force that the motor applies when you release the throttle and the trigger is just in the neutral position. I'll give you an example of one of the ways drag brake can be used. One of my kits is a high-speed Rustler. It's capable of speeds over 100 miles an hour. Now, when you're going 100 plus miles an hour with your RC, the thing doesn't stop on a dime. It takes a lot of distance to stop. And so basically what I do is I'll set like a real low, or I'll set like a low drag brake strength, maybe somewhere around 40%, let's say, or 30%, 40%, something like that. And then I'll actually set my braking strength at something more around the 70 to 80% area. That way, essentially, what I can do is, once I've reached my peak speed, I've held it there for a second or two, hopefully from my GPS to pick up the max speed that it was doing. Then when I go to stop, basically what I do, the first thing I do is I just let off the trigger, which engages the drag brake. And like I said, I usually set that at a really low percentage, like 30, 40%, so it doesn't go spinning out of control or, something crazy. It's enough to slow it down, but it's not enough to send it spinning out of control or anything. And then once the kit has slowed down, to a more reasonable speed, like 50 or 60 miles an hour from the drag brake, then I'll actually apply braking, more braking power using the actual brake on the transmitter. So that's kind of an example of why you would, one example of, how you could use drag brake and how it differs from max brake setting. Let's see, what else do we have here? Under the power tab, we have things like max forward power. You can limit your forward power of your motor if you wanted to. I don't know why you would, but you could. Max reverse power. I usually set my max reverse speeds to about 50% of the max forward speeds because you don't need to go real fast in reverse, and typically half of your forward speed is more than enough for reverse. Then there's something that's called punch control. Now the punch control setting controls how much the ESC limits its application of power to the motor in order to maintain control of the car under acceleration from a dead stop or coming out of a corner. So basically, if you have zero punch control or you have it disabled, essentially when you if you jam the throttle back all the way back, your kit is going to immediately apply 100% of the power it has available to the motor, and it's going to accelerate as fast as it possibly can. Now the problem is, especially for kits that are geared for acceleration more so than top speed, is if you give it too much throttle, if you give a torquey car too much throttle, it'll usually wheelie or flip over. Now, if you're racing or something like that, you obviously don't want to be pulling wheelies, coming out of turns and stuff. So, if you have that problem, you might want to set some punch control. That way, when you give it when you blip the throttle, it doesn't go wheeling out of control. Um, there's a torque limit setting. Um, which the torque control setting allows you to limit the amount of torque that the motor can produce, which allows for better control of the car. Um, I honestly don't really understand how torque limiting is different than punch control. To me, they sound like kind of one and the same thing. So far have never even used torque control, or torque limit rather. I just use punch control. If somebody wants to leave a comment or whatever on the difference between the two, that would be much appreciated. I'd like to know myself. Um, I'm by no means an expert at electric RCs. You know, I know a lot more than your beginner, and I know probably a little bit more than your average intermediate guy, but I don't know everything. I don't even come close to being an expert by any means. So I apologize if there is any holes in my video or my explanations, trying to explain everything to the best of my ability in a way that you guys can digest it. Um, anyway, there's also under the advanced tab, there's motor timing. You can turn the motor timing up, which basically means the more motor timing you have, the faster your motor is going to run. But it also at the same time it's going to produce more heat. More timing equals more power, but it also equals more heat. Now, if you don't have a heat problem, then no biggie. You know, give it some, turn up the motor timing. Motor timing is more effective on censored ESCs and motors than it is on non-censored or sensorless. I usually don't use timing. Maybe if I'm racing, I will. If I don't have a heat problem, I might use some timing then. But for just bashing, you don't need timing. You don't need to advance your motor timing. Um, arming time. It's just the amount of seconds from the time you flip the switch to the time it fully arms and is ready to go. Throttle deadband. Basically, you can control how much room you have to move the trigger before it actually engages either forward or backwards. The lower your throttle deadband, the less wiggle room you have before it actually engages. Start power. Again, it's kind of like punch control. I really don't understand why there's a different setting, because as far as I can tell, it's basically the same kind of thing. And then there's tabs for throttle curve, brake curve, and then updating the firmware. That's the Castle software in particular. Teakins is very similar to that. You're not really going to find much difference there between the Tekin and the Castle software, um, in terms of the settings anyway. And there are a couple of different ones, but that gives you that covers all the basics. Anything else you might find in a Tekin motor, or I mean a Tekin ESC rather, in the programming is probably going to be Tekin specific. Oh, let's see, what else? What else haven't we covered yet? I think that covers just about everything. At least everything that I can think of, and all the notes that I had jotted down. So if if anybody has any questions or comments, or would like to point out any errors that I might have made, then you can get a hold of me either through my Facebook page, which is at www.facebook.com/Graywolf Studios 74, or you can email me at graywolfstudios74@gmail.com. And I look forward to hearing from you guys. If you like the videos, please subscribe if you haven't already. If they help you out, if you think they can help somebody else out, feel free to share them wherever you'd like. Go to visit my Facebook page and give me a like there. There's my Facebook page is basically where I keep all of my pics, all of my pics of my kit, my hobby room, kits. I mean, not I have more than one kit. I keep all my pics on my Facebook page, and we have some discussion on the Facebook page. I usually give updates on what I'm doing or working on or planning to work on, trying to work on, kind of stuff via my Facebook page. So you can go there and check out the pictures, ask questions, or you can ask questions through email. Anyway, that's it for this video. It's long enough. I'm going to get out of here and look forward to the next video, which is going to be on lipos. Peace.